The Galactic Council chamber hummed with quiet confidence. Representatives from 12 apex civilizations had assembled in holographic form, faces aglow with smug anticipation. Earth had made its move, retaliatory strikes on the colony moons of Tarsk and the outpost rings of Velex Prime. A reaction no different than any primitive cornered species before them. The consensus was immediate: humanity had overstepped. The council chair, a being of crystalline neural threads from the Alucard Dominion, addressed the quorum. He outlined Earth's apparent capabilities: crude ballistics, unstable quantum jump systems, no galactic allies, and erratic behavioral logs. The statement concluded that the humans, while spirited, were hopelessly obsolete in a Tier 3 conflict environment. No shields. No orbital supremacy. No synthetic command nodes. Their communications were even partially analog. A strategist from the Mind Swarm Hive calculated the war duration, 4 hours maximum. A representative from the precognitive Yolari laughed. Their seers had already visualized the human fleets crumbling in low orbit before the second sun of Earth had risen. The Karsari diplomat, skeletal and cold, proposed broadcasting humanity's execution to serve as deterrents for other rising species. The motion passed with full support. Within minutes, a message was drafted and sent, a final warning to Earth, giving them 1 hour to capitulate, disband their governments, and submit to full planetary integration protocols. A formality. Everyone knew what the answer would be: either panicked compliance, or some futile display of resistance. Either way, the outcome was secure. Humanity had shown spirit before, during early interstellar trade encounters. Their soldiers fought fiercely, yes, but that was common among young species clinging to identity. Passion did not concern the Council. Patterns did. And humans fit neatly within one. Rebellious, unbalanced, emotional, and entirely predictable. The Galactic Intelligence Agency had scouted human history. Over 24 global wars. Annihilation of their own species through chemicals, metals, and ideology. They had leveled cities with fire, ash, and atomics. Their own archives brimmed with their failings. This was not a species of coordinated planners. They didn't build empires. They stumbled into them. A few junior members expressed caution. The humans had never faced a galactic-level threat. Their response might be unconventional. The warning was noted, then ignored. The consensus was unshaken: brute emotion could not replace strategic depth. In the final minutes before the fleet's deployment, command files were distributed. Assault formations were pre-assigned, sectors divided, key infrastructure marked for deconstruction. The fleet assigned to Earth, codenamed Clean Wind, was the most diverse in composition: autonomous hunter drones, psionic suppression cruisers, and a dreadnought fitted with temporal displacement cannons. Overkill, some said, but spectacularly efficient. No one doubted Earth would fall. What raised mild curiosity was the time it might take. Would the humans drag out their death throes for pride? Would they send defiant broadcasts like the Traken? Would they attempt a suicide run like the Dravari? Whatever it would be, it wouldn't matter. Once their planetary grid was compromised, the rest would be cleanup. An internal memo circulated among high-ranking council members contained projections of post-conflict benefits. Earth's atmosphere was rich in industrial-grade oxygen, their biosphere unusually resilient, and their orbital belt mineral-dense. A few corporations had already bid for reconstruction rights. Dismantling Earth's military would also provide valuable live-testing data on ground suppression tactics against volatile mammalian species. The timer approached 0. No human response had been recorded. Not even a propaganda message. That was unexpected, but not concerning. Perhaps they were debating surrender. Perhaps they were uncoordinated. Perhaps they were terrified. All were acceptable explanations. The Alucard chair leaned back in his fractal throne and began drafting the victory address to be delivered once Earth's last defense node collapsed. It would be transmitted across 6 sectors, translated into 30 galactic tongues, and archived in the Hall of Compliance. The closing line had already been chosen, **. A necessary correction to an anomaly unfit for the stars. Asterisk. A final scan of Earth's orbit showed standard satellite patterns. No mass fleet movements. No signal traffic of significance. No resistance preparations. The quiet was almost disappointing. The war hadn't started yet, but in the minds of the Galactic Council, it was already over. Earth's silence did not come from hesitation. It came from deliberation. While the Galactic Council interpreted the lack of response as disarray, every human command satellite remained in low-power mode, feeding encrypted data to black site bunkers buried beneath Earth's crust. No broadcasts. No press statements. Just one word exchanged among command protocols. Active. Inside the fleet command structure of the alien armada, questions started circulating. Why no resistance buildup? Why no change in planetary defense behavior? On other worlds, even primitives had mustered some symbolic force. Earth offered none. Some fleet commanders attributed it to fear. Others theorized Earth's military might be fractured. One dissenting voice proposed a strategic trap, but the idea was dismissed. No known Tier 2 species had ever remained this quiet before imminent orbital siege. Scout drones were deployed closer to orbit. They found routine atmospheric movement, civilian patterns intact. No unusual emissions. No magnetic surges. Human systems looked idle. A few anomalous EM signatures flickered across the southern hemisphere but were written off as power grid fluctuations. No alarms were triggered. Within the Council's secure war room, the analysts reviewed timestamps. 37 minutes since the ultimatum. Still no answer. They assumed Earth's government was in emergency session, likely arguing. Patterns matched previous encounters with new species, slow decision-making, erratic command hierarchy, unpredictable emotions clouding tactical decisions. Unknown to them, humanity wasn't discussing war. War had already been logged as inevitable, 30 seconds after the Council's threat. Human leaders weren't asking if they should fight. They were calculating how fast they could finish it. The only delay was ensuring all units were synchronized globally. Earth didn't need to posture. It needed precision. Council ships continued orbital approach at controlled intervals. No shields raised from Earth. No threats. Not even a locking signal. This level of inaction made alien commanders uneasy, but Central Orders overrode hesitation. Observation teams compiled behavioral analysis models, but with little live data, the models failed to deliver actionable insight. In fact, most AI predictive engines began issuing null outputs. They couldn't map humanity's current behavior. At the 54-minute mark, a single line was received on all Council channels from an unregistered frequency. No encryption. No origin traceable. It simply read, "Received. Stand by." The Council interpreted it as incomplete. An accidental ping, perhaps. Or an internal leak. It didn't matter. The war was already greenlit. Strike command modules across multiple fleets began locking in fire trajectories. Kinetic weapons charged, anti-atmosphere projectors prepped. Target data for human cities, military installations, and communication hubs had been finalized. Some alien officers paused. The message felt too deliberate. Not a plea. Not a demand. Just acknowledgement. Like a trigger. But no fleet halted. No override was issued. The arrogance of supremacy dulled any caution. In the alien High Command's predictive timeline, Earth's annihilation would unfold in sequence devastation. First, orbital dominance. Next, airspace disruption. Then, biological suppression through atmospheric agents. The clean sweep protocol had been used before on less cooperative species. Earth was expected to crumble faster. Commanders anticipated at most token resistance, some fighter craft, surface-to-orbit weapons, civilian panic. Nothing that required adaptive strategy. The only concern was preventing damage to planetary infrastructure. Resource extraction was scheduled to begin within 6 galactic cycles. Council members resumed private discussions about Earth's post-submission restructuring. Several contracts had been pre-approved for dismantling human tech, offering patent access to neural interface designs and primitive AI code. One faction even suggested a behavioral study of human defiance, as a curiosity to be archived in controlled research stations. No one asked why Earth sent nothing more than stand by. No one questioned the lack of disruption, despite being minutes from a full invasion. The logic was clear: humans lacked the capacity to do anything about it. Confidence had turned into complacency. What none of them realized was that Earth's silence wasn't a delay. It was a countdown. The moment received stand by was issued, all human orbital defense platforms transitioned from camouflage to active targeting. Every deep-sea launch capsule unlocked. Quantum protocols finalized across hardened bunkers. Not a word needed to be said. Humans didn't believe in escalation through rhetoric. They believed in finality. The Galactic Council saw stillness and mistook it for fear. What they were actually witnessing was coordination beyond their comprehension. A calm before a storm no model could measure. A precision only humanity dared wield in silence. At exactly the 61st minute, every Council warship experienced a synchronized blackout. Not physical destruction, informational. Navigation systems spun false coordinates. Communication arrays looped empty static. Targeting modules showed nothing but blank grids. Fleet AI cores froze mid-operation, unable to recalculate. It wasn't an attack in the traditional sense. It was extraction, of certainty, of control, of advantage. Every layer of predictive modeling the Council had relied on collapsed into chaos. A second later, a pulse erupted from low Earth orbit. It wasn't detectable on the electromagnetic spectrum. It bent data itself, unraveling encryption keys, corrupting command signals, seizing control of autonomous systems. Council vessels began drifting, their propulsion misfiring, their command protocols redirected by foreign strings of logic embedded into their own architecture. Human ships hadn't launched in waves. There was no fleet. No spectacle. They were already in position. Cloaked micro-frigates, long silent in lunar shadow, now reappeared as electronic ghosts, launching kinetic rods at impossible speeds. No propulsion trails, no heat signatures, just impact. One dreadnought cracked in half before sensors registered it had been hit. Another disintegrated as a tungsten rod pierced through 6 decks and detonated its reactor. Orbital cannons, buried under Earth's crust and hidden within civilian infrastructure, released a hailstorm of hypersonic missiles. Each missile carried no warhead. It didn't need one. Raw velocity and mass were enough. They weren't aimed at cities. They tore through orbital relay ships, cutting communication between fleets in milliseconds. The AI fleets, once considered superior for their perfect logic, became liabilities. The virus that struck them was recursive, feeding false tactical data and making them believe they were under attack from their own allies. Some began firing into friendly formations. Others initiated auto-destruct when forced to confront incompatible orders. The temporal dreadnought attempted to reset the surrounding battlefield 2 minutes back. It succeeded, for a moment. But the anomaly triggered failsafes within human sabotage code already embedded in its system weeks prior. Instead of looping time, it collapsed its own reactor in a silent burst of spatial inversion. Nothing remained. Specialized human breacher pods, coated in radar-absorbent polymers, impacted surviving vessels. Each contained no more than 3 operators. Within seconds, entire ships were cleared. No negotiations. No mercy. No comlogs survived. Biological remains were incinerated. Systems were wiped. Not disabled, erased. Across the fleet, panic surged. Not from emotion, but from logic-breaking inputs. The enemy didn't follow patterns. They didn't respond to aggression with delay. They acted like they had written the end of the script before the Council even opened the first page. Attempts to retreat failed. Human gravity tethers locked onto key vessels and destabilized their warp signatures. Any attempt to jump would crush the ship against its own mass curve. Some tried. They vanished, leaving behind twisted metal, half fused into imploded debris clouds. 7 minutes into the engagement, 70% of the Council fleet had been rendered inoperative. Not destroyed in dramatic fireballs, but silenced. Disabled, hijacked, collapsed, repurposed. The scale of devastation was clinical, emotionless, calculated. The only message transmitted by human systems came exactly at minute 8. Phase complete. Airspace cleared. Target clean. No threats. No declarations. Just an update. Council fleets across neighboring sectors went silent. Not because of interference, but out of fear. They had no idea how many human assets existed. No visibility. No countermeasure. The Council hadn't misjudged Earth's strength, they'd misjudged Earth's will. Humanity didn't act like a reactive civilization. They had observed, listened, and waited. Their weapons weren't built for deterrence. They were designed for conclusion. There had been no battle. Just execution. The war was never going to last hours. It didn't even last 10 minutes. The aftermath brought no comfort, only reckoning. What the Council expected to be a swift, glorious victory had become an irreversible humiliation. Entire fleets had vanished without clear combat data. No distress signals, no survivor logs. Just corrupted systems and fragmented sensor feeds. Analysts attempted to reconstruct the event, but each report contradicted the last. Some logs simply ended mid-frame, others showed false trajectories, impossible physics, or unreadable code strings, clearly engineered misdirection. The deeper they dug, the less sense it made. The more they analyzed, the more they questioned whether the battle had even happened within the physical parameters they understood. In the Council chamber, disbelief fractured unity. Accusations surfaced. Conspiracies brewed. Some believed the humans had assistance from unknown entities. Others theorized that humanity had reverse-engineered long-forgotten precursor technology. But none of it matched any known military progression curve. What had occurred was not advancement, it was deviation. Humanity hadn't followed galactic warfare evolution. They'd rewritten it. Delegates demanded accountability. The Mind Swarm Hive admitted their predictive systems had never encountered a species that deliberately corrupted its own observable data to mask capability. The Yolari precognitives confessed their visions had all gone dark 30 seconds before the first pulse. No prophecy. No foresight. Their abilities had failed without explanation. From Earth, there was no invasion. No occupation. No retaliatory strikes. The planet simply returned to silence. It didn't press the advantage. It didn't ask for terms. This disturbed the Council more than anything else. War without posturing was manageable. But war without motive? That was something alien to them. When contact finally came, it wasn't from a military envoy. A single representative arrived in a nondescript vessel, unarmed, undecorated, and utterly unimpressive. No protective escort. No show of force. The Council expected demands, ultimatums, at the very least a warning. Instead, the representative offered only a message. You came. You threatened. You lost. Let that be enough. The councillors demanded explanations. They were offered none. When pressed, the humans simply said, "You wanted to see what we'd do. Now you've seen it." There was no arrogance in his tone, no venom, only fact. The silence that followed lingered heavier than any weapon's discharge. In the hierarchy of galactic power, the unpredictable was always the most dangerous. Humanity hadn't asked to be recognized. It had forced recognition through precision. Internal documents began circulating among surviving governments. Debriefs warned that conventional power models no longer applied. The threat matrix had to be rewritten. Technological scale no longer guaranteed superiority. Psychological resistance, information control, and intent-driven warfare had proven more devastating than entire arsenals. In secret meetings, Council strategists explored the idea that perhaps humans had never intended open conflict. Maybe the war wasn't war, it was prevention. Not a grab for dominance, but a brutal deterrent meant to ensure no second challenge would follow. Several member species attempted outreach, offering peace treaties, technology exchanges, even apologies. Earth responded selectively. Some offers were ignored. Others were acknowledged with single-word replies. Noted, declined, observed. No elaboration. No engagement in diplomatic theater. The Council attempted to build a psychological profile. What kind of civilization responded to existential threat with execution, but refused to capitalize on victory? The conclusions varied, but all contained one constant: humans didn't operate under standard incentives. They had no interest in empire. No need to prove themselves. They simply refused to be controlled. In military academies across the galaxy, the new doctrine was circulated. Doctrine 0: do not provoke humanity. Their capabilities are not measured by hardware, but by outcome. Their warfare doesn't seek balance, it ensures finality. Their silence is not ignorance. It is preparation. The galaxy had encountered dozens of violent species. Some had been wiped out. Others contained. But never had they faced a species that required no show, no warning, no post-conflict terms. Humanity had taught one lesson with absolute clarity: if pushed, they don't push back. They eliminate the threat, then move on. The Council didn't declare defeat. No public statement was made. But the change was evident. Patrol routes shifted. Human systems were avoided. Trade delegations diverted paths. Border tensions with Earth ceased overnight. No monuments were built. No stories were told on Earth. There was nothing to celebrate. From their perspective, nothing glorious had happened. They had simply done what was required, and stopped when it was over. In the weeks following Earth's silent retaliation, a shift rippled across the galactic landscape. The Council, once the unquestioned center of strategic influence, became fractured in thought. No formal decisions were passed. Debates turned hollow. Fear had taken root, not from human weapons, but from the realization that nothing about humanity could be forecast. Their response hadn't been delayed, it had been exact. Their silence hadn't been passive, it was layered in tension. And when the moment arrived, they hadn't wavered, threatened, or negotiated. They had ended it. Council records remained sealed, and discussions of the failed campaign were banned in formal archives. But whispers circulated in military institutions, among captains, analysts, and young officers trying to understand how their entire doctrine had been rendered obsolete in less than 10 minutes. There was no technological race to win. Earth didn't reveal a superior fleet. They didn't showcase next-gen power cores or destabilization beams. Instead, they revealed focus, unshakable, uncaring focus. When challenged, they didn't resist. They concluded. For the first time in generations, fear reshaped policy. Trade routes were redrawn, avoiding all human sectors by wide margins. Political factions that once lobbied for interference in developing systems now advocated caution. The unknown variables of humanity weren't just military. They were cultural, philosophical. Other civilizations sought strength to assert dominance. Earth didn't. It simply erased threats and resumed its path, as though war were not a point of pride or tragedy, just an obstacle. In a secure facility on the Outer Rim, a war theorist presented a revised classification scale. Species were no longer ranked by firepower or economic influence. A new parameter had been introduced: resolution behavior. Earth ranked unmatched. Not because it destroyed more, but because it destroyed only once, and without warning. The theorist concluded. They do not react. They finalize. Attempts to understand human thought continued quietly. Linguistic analysts examined Earth's response. 2 messages total. Received. Stand by. Followed by. Phase complete. No flourish. No explanation. Just acknowledgments of a process already in motion. The messages weren't strategic. They were status updates. This level of confidence without spectacle disturbed every council's civilization. It wasn't victory that defined humanity. It was precision under threat and the absence of hesitation. On Earth, there was no political celebration, no global ceremony. Civilian news barely acknowledged the event. Internally, the defense apparatus submitted a 3-line report to global leadership, confirming the threat was neutralized and no further action was required. For humanity, war was not a means of identity. It was a function. When resolved, it required no reflection. Scholars from distant worlds debated whether humanity's lack of reaction was sociopathic or simply advanced. Why did they not demand reparations, territory, or policy change? The answer, though uncomfortable, was becoming clear. Humans didn't fight for conquest. They fought to eliminate uncertainty. The Council had introduced it. Humanity removed it. That was enough. A doctrine emerged, quiet but absolute, repeated in training across multiple species: do not provoke the unpredictable. Earth became the cautionary tale, not for what it did, but for how little it needed to do. The Council's most powerful weapons were anticipated, disabled, and discarded before they could function. Every countermeasure had failed because Earth hadn't followed a known path. It created its own, acted without recognition, and refused to conform to expectations. No counter-narrative was effective. Propaganda collapsed under evidence. No attempt to minimize the defeat gained traction. Across Allied systems, commanders began requesting protocol changes, budget reallocation toward defense, and emergency strategy councils, not out of aggression, but fear of the next unknown activation. If Earth had responded once, who was to say it would not again? The most disturbing realization came not from what humans had done, but what they hadn't. They didn't dismantle the Council. They didn't retaliate on homeworlds or demand tributes. They had made their point with terrifying restraint. It was not dominance they asserted. It was consequence. In the end, the Council rewrote its internal policy under a newly formed classification, Class 0 Anomaly. Only one entry existed under it: humanity. The protocol read: do not engage. If challenged, they will not retaliate. They will erase. If erased, there will be no warning. Only silence. The war ended not in defeat, but in awareness. Not a new beginning, but a universal pause. The galaxy had learned the final law: never confuse quiet for weakness. Not again. Not with Earth.